Hey there, Meidas Canada viewers, resistors from all over the globe. Charlie Angus here from the wilds of northern Canada, where the weather is seriously changing. Most of our leaves are gone now, and there's that cold chill in the air, so we're coming up to snow days, and not quite yet, but we're counting the days until that happens. On today's show, we're going to talk about the other World Series ad. Now, you got to hand it to Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, for hitting it out of the ballpark with perhaps the most famous World Series ad ever, where all he did was play the words of Ronald Reagan, and it sent Donald Trump off the freaking deep end. And MAGA Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, Lying Pete, as we're calling him now, he started dropping F-bombs, and they say 5 billion people have seen the ad. So that's quite the hit for Premier Ford. Now, we're going to talk about the other ad, though, the one he showed in Canada, which is about the plan to exploit the lands in northern Ontario, the lands in Treaty 9 of Indigenous people, to build the Ring of Fire massive mining development. We're going to talk about what that means, and we're going to talk about Doug Ford's treatment of Indigenous people and where Canada needs to go in these times of trouble. But first, I just want to get to some of the messages and responses. Oh, check this out. This is my Trooper beer muggy thing. Keep my beer cold. Now, if most people around the world probably think Canadians are polite and we're quiet. Until you hear our rock and roll. We like it loud. We like party rock. See, raise a little hell. Trooper, another great song they had was "We're here for a good time, not a long time." Yeah, that's pretty much the Canadian spirit, because if you're living at minus 40 and you're afraid to go out and party, well, you're not going to live here very long. Anyways, thanks for the Trooper swag. Carol writes from Florida. Yes, vive le Canada. Steve Harlan writes from Scotland. I'm in my mid-50s. I have various health issues, but I would gleefully come to Canada from Scotland to protect your borders and my aunts, uncles, and cousins if the U.S. tries to invade. Elbows up and much love. Thank you, Stephen. It's always great to hear from the Ain folk. California here. There's millions of us who are with you. Thanks to you and everyone else who's fighting the good fight. Do not give in, people. There are way more of us. Resist, boycott, stand up for what is right and what you believe in. Susan Yaden writes, this channel should have way more subscribers. Come on, Canada. Charlie's speaking for us. Spread the word and donate if you can. Yeah, we got to get way past 200,000. MG Patry writes, bonjour from Ottawa. Happy to see that we're almost at 200,000 K subscribers this morning. Vive le Canada libre. Et merci de partager les commentaires en français aussi. And Marie-Josée writes, merci Charlie Angus pour votre travail. Merci pour nous aider à être unis tout ensemble, francophones et anglophones, dans cette bataille contre le fascisme qui vient des États-Unis et d'ici les Maple MAGA. And Cedric Chardet writes a similar message in English. He says, thank you, Charlie, for responding to messages in French. Most of your viewers are English-speaking and are American, but you still take the time to answer in French. You don't know how much we Francophones appreciate that. I write in English because I want to point out to everyone here how much we care about the official languages in Canada. So thanks to Meidas. To include you is the Meidas Canada branch. Thanks again for what you do. Hello from l'Acadie des Terres et Forêts. Sincerely, Cedric Charret. And Stevie Wonders in Colorado writes, love me some Charlie. Let me know where to send the elbow sharpeners. Love the channel. Wishing I was living in Canada. Sigh. And Greg Miller writes, hello from Missouri. Deep red, but I fly blue. Okay, so let's get to today's program and the latest actions by Premier Doug Ford. Doug Ford, some days he's got the Captain Canada hat on, and some days he's got Doug the Grifter looking after his developer buddy's hat. Some days it's hard to tell. I'm going to just say I'm no supporter of Doug Ford, but that World Series ad was freaking brilliant. All top marks there, Dougie. But his other record in terms of actually standing up in Ontario is pretty mixed, and it's very much right out of the Republican playbook. For example, issue of homelessness is getting worse and worse across Canada, but in Ontario, there's been 80,000 more people left homeless just in the last 3 years. That's a 25% increase. And this past week it got out that Doug Ford was planning on ripping up the rent control rules that would have protected millions who live in this province. And when that got out and people started to freak out, well, Dougie backed down. But it shows that his inclination is not for public housing and making life more affordable, but helping out buddies. Another thing Doug Ford brought in, or is trying to bring in, is very American-style election financing rules, because we have strict limits in Ontario. We have strict rules that limit the power of backroom money, and Doug Ford saying that that's not fair. Well, Doug, we know what you're up to here. This is, again, about you and your buddies. But I want to talk about the ad about Ring of Fire, because if you saw the ad, I mean, it was all these images of, you know, forests and then mining and big trucks and, you know, tech and phones and happy Ontario residents. If you looked at it and you blinked, you wouldn't have seen the First Nation people that are in there for, I don't know, 10 seconds hugging each other, and then that's it. And Doug Ford saying the issue of Ring of Fire, which is 5,000 kilometer cluster of super rich mining ore bodies in the far north of Ontario. The big problem is red tape. And of course, as a right-winger, Doug Ford's going to cut red tape and get to it. But he's missing out in telling you many of the issues around this. And you didn't see any footage from, say, Nescandiga First Nation, which is in the heart of the Ring of Fire. A community that has gone now, how many days is it without drinking water? 11,224 days without drinking water in a province as rich as Ontario. You want to do the math on that? How many years that is? It's almost 31 years. Doug Ford has never gone to Nescandiga, never talked to them. So none of the images from Nescandiga were in the really, you know, beautiful ad about Doug Ford cutting red tape and making everyone happy. What should have been in the ad was actually the treatment of the provincial member of the legislature, Saul Mamakwa, who represents the people of Nescandiga, who got up in the Queen's Park legislature in Ontario to call out Doug Ford for the lies that he's been saying about his willingness to work with First Nation people. I want you to see this video, because it's chilling, because it just stinks of colonialism, an Indigenous elected leader speaking truth to power and being forced out of the chamber. Watch this.
First Nations in Ontario do not want Bill 5. Yeah. I say no to Bill 5. Last week, the government said that they respect First Nations, that they respect treaty rights. Speaker, we know the Premier is telling untruths to First Nations about...
We'll ask the member to withdraw.
But that's the truth.
I will ask the member to withdraw.
That is the truth. Going.
We'll ask the member to withdraw.
Speaker, Premier is telling untruths. That's the truth.
I will warn the member. Please withdraw.
Our rights are not being respected.
Draw the comment.
Withdrawing. Speak.
Sam Momakwa, you have been named.
What I want to say at the beginning, I figure I always have to say something like this. Like, I am not against mining. I come from a mining town. I've spent many, many years writing about mining, working with mining companies, working with miners. I represent miners. I have no problem with mining. What I have a big problem with is this project, the Ring of Fire. And I can say that because the Ring of Fire was in the constituency that I represented. And for many years, I was absolutely gung-ho about it. But what I saw was it was all about taking the wealth out of this vast region of Treaty 9 while people were living in horrific levels of poverty. I think it's really important, you know, to understand what people are living in a province as rich as this. You have to be able to go to a place like Nescandiga and see it for yourself. But again, few white people ever go there. But if you're looking at it, you're looking at failed infrastructure. You're looking at water systems that don't work. You're looking at continual underfunding of basic things that other municipalities take for granted, whether it's housing, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's education. People are made to make do with what would be unacceptable anywhere else. And the real effects are on the children. And I've seen the effects on the children in terms of the damage that's done to bodies from bad water, the hopelessness. The Scandiga First Nation is sitting there in the Ring of Fire, and you've never heard Doug Ford talk about going there. These are citizens of Ontario. They're citizens of Canada. Why is it that they have to be left on the outside while everyone else talks about this huge wealth that is going to come from this mining project? I seen many things in my life, but seeing young children who grow up without a sense of hope because they can't even drink the water, and their parents couldn't drink the water, and their grandparents couldn't drink the water. And yet what we see is Doug Ford saying he's going to cut red tape. What you're seeing right now is a huge backlash of young Indigenous people speaking up and saying, no, we're not going to be exploited. We're not going to have our lands taken. If we're going to do things in Canada, and we can do things well in Canada, it has to be done right. It has to be done with respect. It has to be done with a recognition of the damage that's been done to First Nation communities. That's all the stuff that Doug Ford left out of his World Series ad. And I think we need to start addressing that, because there's another element of the Ring of Fire that really concerns me, and that is the fact that these are incredibly fragile lands. If Ring of Fire, say, was discovered where I live in Cobalt, hard rock mining town, Timmins, hard rock mining, Sudbury, Thompson, Manitoba, everybody would be just over the moon doing the happy dance, because it's hard rock mining country. This is land where minerals are mined. But when you're up in the Ring of Fire, you're in super fragile peatlands. The Cree people call these the breathing lands, the lungs of Mother Earth. And they're not only fragile, but they're incredibly important in dealing with a planet that's on fire. They say that the peatlands of the James Bay region, where they want to rip up and start blasting and sinking shafts and tearing out the ground, all this is waterlogged peat. If you start to pump out all the water and the lands dry out, of course you're going to start to see more and more fire. But right now, those fragile lands sequester 35 billion tons of carbon. They hold 5 times the amount sequestered in the tropical rainforests. They are literally the lungs of the earth. So, we got very little conversation going about how we move forward in this time of crisis in terms of doing it right. It's been over 20 years they've been trying to get into the Ring of Fire because they haven't figured out how to do it safely. They haven't figured out how to do it environmentally, and they haven't dealt with the basic concerns of communities like Niskandiga First Nation or Ibamatung First Nation. Again, communities that have been completely left on the margins. And what they'll say is that, well, the mines will come in and it'll create wealth for everybody and everyone will get jobs. Well, yes and no. I was in Attawapiskat First Nation when the huge diamond mine was built, and the government wouldn't even build a school for the children, where people were living 20 and 21 people to a moldy house. And one single diamond out of Attawapiskat sold on the international market for $21 million. There's massive wealth to come from the Indigenous lands of Treaty 9. And if the mines are going to happen, it has to be done right. And it has to be done with more care and understanding than simply taking a ad at the World Series and talking about cutting red tape. It's going to mean going to the communities and sitting down and talking with them. And it's about respecting their rights as well. Because that's what we need to do in Canada. We can't simply say we're going to go to the lowest common denominator because MAGA is one step lower on of the lowest common denominators. What makes Canada get through at this time is by our solidarity with each other, our respect for each other, and our determination to do it right. It's like what Winston Churchill said to Hitler: "You do your worst, sir. We will do our best." And so kudos to Dougie for his World Series ad on Ronald Reagan. but absolute failure on your refusal to respect Indigenous people, Doug, your refusal to speak the truth about how your government isn't negotiating and treating people with respect. And we have to do better, because these projects are not going to go ahead, because speaking to Indigenous people, they're not going to be pushed around in the 21st century like they were pushed around in the 20th century, like they were pushed around in the 19th century. They have a right to be full partners with Canada, because it is fundamentally, at the end of the day, this relationship of the Indigenous and settler on same lands, and we got to work this out. Anyways, that's it for today, folks. I wanted to share that with you. You probably didn't read much coverage of the other ad. That's why you're watching Meidas Canada. And so hit subscribe. Let's get to 200,000 viewers. And if you want to read some of the stuff I've been writing about things like Ring of Fire and that, please support Charlie Angus Resistance Substack. Thanks so much. Kick at that darkness. It's going to bleed daylight.